Welcome to The Business That Pays with Adam Tolliver from Artisan Financial Strategies, where we mind the business that pays you. In this podcast, we empower successful families and business owners to make informed decisions about their finances through courageous conversations. Through his expertise as a practicing investment advisor representative with Eagle Strategies, LLC, a registered investment advisor, Adam teaches you how to create a wealth ecosystem by combining a practical technical framework with your personal, family, and community values. Join us for this journey where Adam normalizes sustainable wealth building and gives you the keys to make courageous, proactive financial decisions.
As a business owner, you can plan and think you have all the bases covered for your company's future. Many times, though, a business owner has to exit that role involuntarily. In this episode of his podcast, The Business That Pays, Adam Tolliver of Artisan Financial Strategies goes over the most common major events that can force a change at a closely held private or family business. I'm Patrice Sikora. In previous episodes, Adam has discussed succession planning and de-risking your business. Now it's time for the 5 Ds. And Adam, I have to say, this first D is rather significant.
It absolutely is. The first D in our 5 Ds is death. And of course, not something anyone is ever excited to talk about, but just as on the personal financial planning side of things, we always want to be considerate of what happens to our business in the event of a premature death. And of course, this matters for a business owner, right? If a business owner passes away too soon, what happens to the business? How is the business affected? How are the other stakeholders? How is the family affected? But this is also important for the other stakeholders, important stakeholders in the business. So if you've got a key employee, or if there are multiple partners in the business, there are a lot of additional unfortunate outcomes that can happen as a result of a key person passing away in a business. And if it's not accounted for, it can be a nightmare to deal with.
Tell me more about that.
So the first thing that we want to think about is business continuity, of course. So if a business owner dies, obviously that person is typically going to have a certain amount of relationship capital, knowledge capital, experience capital that is critical to running the business. And if you don't have some sort of formal outline of the way that type of power is transitioned and some sort of financial windfall that's going to help to bolster operations and guide you through that transition period where you might have some turnover with clients, or you might have some turnover with employees, even because some people will stay working at a place because they want to be with want to work with a certain business owner, then you need to have that plan in place. The other thing is that if you have partners, and this is a big one, people have probably heard of or have some sort of buy-sell agreement in place. And buy-sell agreements are meant to protect existing business owners from being in business with people that they didn't sign up to be in business with. And usually that means each other's families. So you may love, and respect your business partner's family, their wife, sometimes their mom, their dad, their cousins, their whoever you've met, right? Their children. But, in the event that you've got a business partner, let's say you're in a business, Patrice and I, we're working together, right? And we have a great deal of respect for each other. We've grown really close over the years. Our families have grown close. I love and respect your business acumen. You feel the same way about mine. But something happens to me tragically, right? You have a great affinity for my wife. You love my kids, but my wife doesn't have the experience working with you directly, and does not have the experience working in our business directly. But of course, as we've discussed, this business is a huge part of my wealth. And my wife, of course, rightfully is entitled to a huge piece of that wealth. But you don't want to go into business with her. So we've got to have some sort of mechanism in place that is going to satisfy what my wife should be getting financially without her being able to come into the business day one of me being gone and suddenly having the same power and say so over what happens to the business and in the business.
Right.
And so that's what a buy-sell agreement essentially is for. And death is one of the stipulations that you want to account for in that buy-sell agreement.
How does it feel talking to business owners about this?
It varies. It definitely varies. And I would say often business owners can be very matter of fact and straightforward, and they can understand it right away. But of course, with a subject as heavy as death, some people are just not excited about facing those possibilities. And the only thing that I can say is that ultimately it is just prudent business. It's a smart way to do business. And it adds to what we call the structural capital of your firm when you have these sort of plans outlined, because it assures that you've checked the boxes on thinking about business continuity.
Now let's pretend we both have partners, all right? And we have our own businesses, we have partners. I have planned my estate. You have planned your estate, but our partners have not. Does that impact a business if you or I were to die?
It can, and that's part of the reason that you want to work through this entire sort of scenario and have these agreements in place, because in so many ways, especially in a private business or closely held business, it's very difficult to separate the business and the personal. You have to have some understanding. And of course, that doesn't mean that all of that planning is overlapped, but especially if you have business partners, you are essentially sharing a major asset. The biggest asset on your balance sheet is probably the biggest asset on my balance sheet, right? Mm-hmm. And so in doing so, you do have to have some very clear understanding of how that ownership is split and how that ownership can and will be passed. And that's a big part of what we're doing in de-risking the business, is establishing all of those things up front before some sort of messy fight or war rightfully could break out, because we're fighting over a very valuable asset.
And that could then damage that asset, I would think.
100%. And then oftentimes businesses end up being dissolved, or everyone ends up getting bought out and going their separate ways. And so you may have a new spinoff business, but a lot of the equity and the sweat that you've put into the initial business that had it running to a certain level cannot be regained when you're starting from scratch with a new spinoff business. And it can get very messy and very stressful.
And I should think personal relationships with customers as well as with ex or former partners, they're going to come in there and they could actually poison the situation.
Absolutely.
Wow. All right, disability. That's another D here. Now, in some cases, I would think disability might actually be worse than death.
In a lot of cases, it can. And one of the main reasons is that disability is actually more likely before the age of 65 than death. And that's something that a lot of people don't always wrap their head around, but you've got to think about it from the perspective of if you or a key person, someone that you need is vital to the operation of the business, suffers some sort of disability, you or a business partner, then if it's a disability that prevents you from doing the job that's necessary, or that takes you out of the business completely, there has to be some sort of recourse there to account for the same issues as we're talking about with death, business continuity, making sure that your family still has the income that you've been dependent on and they've been dependent on from the business. And so it is unfortunately, extremely prevalent, and even more so, ironically enough, as healthcare has improved over the years, because a lot of the things that used to kill people now just takes them out of work for a very long time. Things like cancer, and obviously cancer hasn't been cured, but a lot of illnesses that may have killed someone before can actually just take them out of business or have them not being able to work for a prolonged period of time. And sometimes that disability oftentimes actually is going to be temporary. So you'll be able to come back to work, but there needs to be some sort of contingency plan in place to make sure that your income as a business owner continues and that there's some sort of business continuity clause that can keep business operations afloat.
Have you seen any cases where a disability has actually sapped all the resources of a business and it's gone down the tubes?
Unfortunately, I have. Thank you for asking that
Mm.
question. I have. I've seen a situation where I've, I have two. So one is for a business owner who was in his early 40s and otherwise
Ooh,
pretty
ooh,
healthy, and he ended up getting into an accident and was immobile for I think 7 months or so.
ooh.
Um, and and as part of his treatment, um, he ended up having to spend down quite a bit of business resources. And he didn't have a business partner, but he had a key employee who was frustrated with that entire situation, and ultimately had to leave or felt like he had to leave, and that business did not survive. So again, and
Mm.
it was a very successful business at the time, and so things like that where had he had disability planning, a disability policy, or benefits in place
Mm-hmm.
where he could have bolstered his income to make sure that he didn't have to sort of commingle and double dip into his business income in order to make that work would have been a big help.
Wow. You said you had a second one too.
Yes. So unfortunately, another one was an older business owner, and this was a long-term care situation where his wife had a long-term care event, and he didn't have any planning in place for that type of event, and and a lot of it was a matter of his attention being drifted away from the business,
Sure.
and because he didn't have sort of a care plan in place, he ended up having to do it, a lot of it himself, and his attention was away from the business and the operation slipped. Now, fortunately, that business did not completely go under, but that was more of his time resources, energy resource, and attention being pulled away from his business.
And just to repeat what you said at the beginning of this part of the conversation, the risk of becoming disabled is higher than the risk of death.
Absolutely.
So you really have to plan for this. The next D, divorce.
Yes. As we all know, as much as we may start out in, happy, optimistic, divorce is a thing that does happen. And again, knowing the value of a business asset and what it means in a family, oftentimes divorce can have an extremely adverse impact on the health of a business. And so, what we don't want to do, of course, is mess up your marriage trying to protect your business,
Mm-hmm.
but we do need to have a good understanding of what a business partnership split looks like if there is a marital divorce. And so you've got to be able to do that, and you can do it in the early outset by defining your policy on share ownership and value and votes and bylaws in the beginning of starting your business, right? Because you have to have as much documentation as you can in order to protect yourself up front. But there are, I'm sure anyone listening to this who's been in business for a while and knows anyone maybe has heard some horror stories about what can happen with divorce with business owners.
And this an ongoing process because things change. The business grows. Your relationship may not grow well. There are
Hmm.
kids, all kinds of things. But so do you have to go
Absolutely.
back and revisit this a lot?
Yes, you do. And it is one of those regular maintenance things that you've got to be mindful of because, like you said, businesses grow, life changes, life happens. And you can go, some people might go through one, two, or three marriages throughout the process of owning a business. So, and as you do that, you collect more stakeholders, right? So you've
True.
got, multiple wives or husbands, you've got their children along the way who in some capacity or not may have gotten involved or feel some sort of ownership or right to the business, and so protecting yourself along the way becomes very critical.
Sounds to me like in some cases you might be diluting your business there.
It is possible. It is possible.
Hmm. Suppose you have many business partners, multiple partners, And you're getting up there and you think, okay, I want to plan about leaving. And the others say, no, 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 not yet, not yet. How do you talk about that departure?
Yes. Yes, that is a great question. So, departure is the next D in our 5 Ds. And that is really just about the fact that, yeah, we go into business and we may be all super excited and fired up about the project that we're working on. We're on the same page, we're in sync, we work well together. But of course, as you know, if you've got business partners, everyone's got their own lives, they've got their own priorities, they've got their own families and interests to think about. And what you have in mind for the business and the life cycle and how long you want to continue working in it may not be the same as what I have in mind. So if you want to leave early or I want to leave early, we've got to figure out what that exit needs to look like in a way that is fair to both partners, or, of course, partners can be a lot more than just two people. So
Mm-hmm.
we've got to figure out, okay, what's fair for each business partner? How are we going to be able to pay off the departing partner if one of us wants to leave? Who's going to do the work to ensure business continuity? So some of the same issues we discussed with death or disability, if someone is being taken out of the business, what are they taking with them by way of capital, by way of their relationships, by way of their expertise and their skill? Where are we going to be lacking as a team without this person? And then, of course, we've got to think about, again, with continuity, do we have someone internally that can step up?
This makes me question, Adam. People have different talents. When you sit down to come up with one way to pay off somebody if they're going to leave, does everybody get the same amount?
So that's going to depend on the structure of the partnership and stakeholder owners in the beginning. So whatever's been negotiated, and this is one of the reasons that you want to periodically do a business valuation, to make sure that everyone understands what we're basing these potential payoffs on. And the structure of that payoff may look different, but the idea is, if we know, a business partnership may not be an even split in the beginning, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
if someone has an outsized talent or contribution, or they've put in an outsized amount of their own financial equity or sweat equity, they may have a larger share of ownership than the other existing partners. But as long as we've got that, as long as we understand what that initial agreement was, and we're keeping proper track of the valuation. And typically, if you're going to have a payoff event, you want to do a new valuation. So, for instance, if we did a valuation 3 years ago and the business was worth $5 million, and someone's trying to leave now and we haven't done a new valuation, that person could potentially be getting cheated out of a sizable amount of money if the business has continued to grow and thrive. So that's one of the things that you want to do to make sure that you're fairly compensated if you are the departing partner. And also, if you're a partner that's staying behind, you need to be able to continue to keep a pulse on that for yourself as well.
Right. How about a non-compete clause?
That is important. And it may or may not be necessary, right? But I think it's smart to have one, because, again, if someone is leaving the business, they may tell you it's for one thing, and it may be true at the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
But things change, or also, unfortunately, people aren't always as upfront about their motives. And so having a non-compete clause can be especially important depending on what type of industry you're in, and what type of customer diversity you have. So if you're a business that serves a very narrow niche of people, and a partner within your company leaves and has free reign to try to poach a few of your clients, that could be devastating to your business. So being able to say, at least for a period of time, that there's a non-compete after you leave, can be something that's very valuable.
I didn't even think of the poaching. You're absolutely right. You know the right people in the company to go after.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know the problems, the trade secrets, essentially. what's working, what's not working within the company. You know which relationships are kind of on shaky ground for one reason or another. And so it is one of those things that you need to be aware of if you're having an early departure from a business.
And you know how much they're making and how much would be attractive to them.
Exactly.
All right. We've got one more D here. Tell me about that one.
And this one is disagreement. And this is just good old fashioned, founders, partners, key people inside of a business not agreeing on major decisions or having a big disagreement about what direction to go in strategically. And this is obviously one of those things that is to an extent unavoidable. They're going to happen. But what you want to do is account for this in your governance. So this is about policies and procedures. This is about how do we as an organization go through our decision making process. For some people, when there's a disagreement in particular, so for some businesses, it's not uncommon to say, we're going to employ this third party business mediation firm.
Okay.
And we may bring them in just on special occasions if we've got something that is, a major decision financially, a major decision strategically, operationally that we cannot work out together. And unfortunately, sometimes it means that business partners may go their separate way. And now we're back to the previous D, which is departure. And so this is one of those things where you may not be planning to leave, but you may come to a point where it feels like because of this particular major disagreement, we've reached an impasse and we need to go our separate ways.
So there are relationship counselors, though, for business owners?
Yes. So you can use a third party mediator. And sometimes that may just be a consultant that you bring in to be a third eye, to be objective, because of the history and the experience and sort of the baggage that partners may be carrying with the business. A set of fresh eyes to come in and look at it may help. Other times it may be something more substantial. So it's not a consultant, but an actual mediator. If there's some sort of financial grievance that comes from a disagreement.
How long does that often take, mediation?
It depends. So it can be like a week-long engagement. It could be a month, because the amount of context that someone may need to really wrap their head around what the disagreement is. So they may, interview the partners separately. They may interview other stakeholders in the business who have perspectives that the partners don't have, to be able to come to a good conclusion and then have that conversation to hash it out in a way that's a little less emotional than business partners are likely to do. Because again, for the most part, we're talking about closely held businesses, private businesses, and it is very difficult to separate the personal from the business in these areas. So you've got all types of relationship baggage, you've got all types of experience baggage, and just the personal pride and importance to which people hold their businesses. So that third party person can come in almost completely cold. Of course, you hope that anyone you're working with is not completely dismissing the brevity of the situation, but they don't have that same baggage. So they're able to have those conversations and remove the emotion and see it from hopefully a purely logical standpoint.
Does negotiation, mediation last long term? It seems to me that someone is going to feel like I was dissed here. Nobody paid attention to me, or my idea is still better. They'll go along with it for the short term, but what about the long term?
That definitely varies, and you're absolutely correct. It may be a situation where some sort of contingency planning or of some sort of compromise was reached, but one or another partner is not satisfied with that compromise, and typically what that may end up leading to is going back to the last D, which is departure.
All right. Well, why don't you review the 5 Ds for us again, and then tell me how a business owner can reach you, Adam Tolliver?
Absolutely. So our 5 Ds, we've got death, disability, divorce, departure, and disagreement. And again, this is basic risk management for de-risking your business as part of the goal to increase the overall value. And particularly, this focuses on the structural capital. So the policies, the procedures, the documents that you have in place to protect your business. And you can reach me at atolliver@artisanfsonline.com.
I never thought the letter D was so depressing.
Well, when you talk about the 5 Ds, I think that sixth one is in there automatically.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But planning, that is key. And
Absolutely.
To make sure you are planning, make sure you listen to earlier episodes of Adam's podcast, The Business That Pays. Get in touch with Adam Tolliver of Artisan Financial Strategies and get insights into succession planning and small businesses. To know when new episodes are available, be sure to subscribe to The Business That Pays by using the subscribe button on this page, and of course you can share with the share button. I'm Patrice Sikora, and let's talk again later.
Thank you for listening to Business That Pays. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of the Artisan Financial Strategies or Eagle Strategies, LLC, a registered investment advisor. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial professional provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment strategies.
Adam Tolliver, registered representative offering securities through New York Life Securities, LLC, member FINRA SIPC, a licensed insurance agency. 1125 Cambridge Square, Suite C, Alpharetta, Georgia, 30009, 404-210-9311. Financial advisor offering investment advisory services through Eagle Strategies, LLC, a registered investment advisor. New York Life Securities, LLC, and Eagle Strategies, LLC are New York Life companies. Artisan Financial Strategies, LLC, is not owned or operated by New York Life Securities, LLC, or its affiliates. Neither Artisan Financial Strategies, LLC, nor its advisors provide tax, legal, or accounting advice.